So our challenge today is see if we can complete a Raspberry Pi hardware project without using any additional hardware, just what's on the board. Now, most people don't realize, but there is a sensor that's already built into your Raspberry Pi that you don't need any extra peripherals to access. But we can use that sensor to detect when I'm adding heat to the CPU using my finger. And in this video, I'm going to see if I can build a useful project using only that sensor and the LED that's on the board. So the first things first is to figure out how to access the readings from that temperature sensor. Now, it's reported into Linux in a special file. So we open up our terminal and type in cat to list the file, and then sys class thermal zone 0. This is the location of the temperature readings. I found it via Google. And if we list that out, we can see that the Raspberry Pi is currently running at about 42 degrees Celsius. Now, the second thing we need is to figure out how we can turn on and off the LED that's built into the Raspberry Pi. So we're using special files in the Linux operating system to control or to read from these sensors or LEDs. And that's because of the way Linux maps hardware to the file system and lets us use file system tools with our hardware. So for the LED, if I type in echo 0 and send that to the file sys class LEDs LED1 brightness, that should turn off the power light. Permission denied. Oh, great. Okay. I had a tough time trying to Google this. The thing that you need to do is to set the permissions for the file to be able to be read and written from. So you do this with sudo chmod 666 /sys class LEDs LED0 brightness and LED1 brightness. And now setting it to that brightness file allows you to control the LED on and off. And echoing in 1 or 0 was what allowed me to control the LED. I'll see if I can get that. You can see the LED. Hopefully you can see the power LED. So when we do echo 1 into that file, the LED turns on. And then when we do echo 0, the LED turns off. So now that we're able to read from our sensor and we've got an output that we can write to, it's time to put some code together to link the two and make what I hope will be a useful project from this Raspberry Pi. Okay, a quick walkthrough of the code that we have here. Our first set of code initializes the buffer. So it reads in 100 readings from the temperature sensor to give us an idea of what the initial temperature is before we touch the sensor. The second part of this code is the main loop, where we loop through and fill in the short buffer to give us an idea of the average in the short time, and the long buffer to give us an idea in the average in the long. Now, when the short buffer average, when our finger touches the sensor, becomes a different temperature to the long buffer, it means that we've applied our finger to the sensor. So the code detects that and then writes to the file for the LED control and tells it to turn on or off depending on whether we've applied our finger or removed our finger. And there we go. We finally have it detecting when I put my finger on. Whenever I touch my finger to the CPU, the LED lights up. And when I remove my finger, the LED goes away. We've been able to put together a Raspberry Pi sensor project without using any additional hardware. Now, in terms of practical application, the first one that I can think of is a train driver vigilance switch. Now, this is where when a person's driving a train, they need to press and remove their finger in sort of an anti-pattern to make sure that they're still alive. We used to call it a dead man switch, but now I think it's more appropriately termed vigilance switch. But if you held your finger there, the LED output would turn off because the average would normalize. Removing your finger would allow you to apply your finger again to change the temperature once more, thus fulfilling the action of being forced to touch the sensor and then remove your hand from the sensor, as in the case of a train driver vigilance switch. Now, this idea for a project wasn't mine originally. I did find it on a video somewhere, but I've lost the video and would love to credit the YouTuber. So if you know where that video is, please leave a comment down below. And please leave a comment down below if you have any other hardware-based projects that can be implemented without adding anything to the Raspberry Pi. I'd love to hear more.